I think there is this paradox because especially during pregnancy, for some people, it's the first time they've started to get this window into listening to their body. And I think a lot of the time the care during pregnancy is almost disguised as homework because we're looking after our baby. So it's this selflessness and it's, I'm preparing for this new stage. So that's why I'm a bit more accountable. But then once we have baby, we often put ourselves onto the back burner and we define motherhood as often being selfless. But at the same time, like I said, if you are not feeling 100%, you won't be able to give 100%. And that's the hard thing as well.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Healthy Business Lab podcast, where we interview amazing allied health business owners to share their insights, knowledge with other people in the same space. And today I'm super excited to have Dr. Amy Norman from Dynamic Chiropractic with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to have you on board. And again, I only give a very surface level introduction to people because I want people to introduce themselves and share a little bit of their expertise. And we always talk about business owners looking after themselves first and then the business. So I'd love for you to delve into a bit of your background and share a bit about yourself and what you do and those sorts of things.
I'm a chiropractor by trade. I've got my own practice, Dynamic Chiropractic, in the heart of Hurstville. The practice itself we're approaching 5 years. I'm at financial year. And then prior to that, I was contracting my services out to other clinics. But in that time, since having my own business and clinic, I've also branched out and added AquaNatal services in as well. So I look after a lot of mums and bubs, but I do see everyone, but that's predominantly what I'm probably more well known for now is mums and bubs. And I take pregnant women in the water for aquatic fitness, essentially. AquaNatal, there's only, I think, about 3 of us in New South Wales currently. Yeah, wow. So it is very, very niche, but it is fantastic because only like 3 out of 10 pregnant women are getting sufficient exercise during their pregnancy. That's also what I do when I'm not in the practice looking after patients on that table.
Yeah, I love that. And we love a super niche here. We have a side business as well, which is super, super niche in the software space around profit first and cash flow forecasting. But I'd love for you to jump into that a little bit deeper, both arms of what you do and talking about the benefits of what you're doing and how you do it. Because again, there's so many business owners out there that are mums that are trying to do motherhood, trying to do
wearing
business, wearing all those hats. We all juggle so many things. And so looking after ourselves, looking after our body to be able to do all the things we want to do. Why should people be looking after their spine and their nervous system and all those sorts of things?
Looking after ourselves is so important. And I know that it is something that we harp on all the time, but I often think if I am not feeling 100%, I can't give my kids, I can't give my work 100% either. And that's not fair on anyone. I think there is this paradox because especially during pregnancy, for some people, it's the first time they've started to get this window into listening to their body. And I think a lot of the time the care during pregnancy is almost disguised as homework because we're looking after our baby. It's this selflessness and it's, I'm preparing for this new stage. So that's why I'm a bit more accountable. But then once we have baby, we often put ourselves onto the back burner and we define motherhood as often being selfless. But at the same time, like I said, if you are not feeling 100%, you won't be able to give 100%. And that's the hard thing as well, because for a lot of us, we do define what we contribute to our family, our relationship, our work into what we can bring to the table. So it's so important. And what I have learned definitely in the last 5 years since having my first is that you can't be so hard on yourself, but at the same time, you can definitely have everything. You don't really need to choose necessarily between having a career and being a present parent, but it is very hard to give 100% at those things simultaneously. If you've got something that's depleting your ability to be at 100% in any capacity, it is additionally hard to then dual task and juggle those things at 100% as well, because that's just the next level is the juggle, I find.
Here, what you even just touched upon that a little bit, and even going back to that point of motherhood being the first time we're listening to our bodies, like truly listening, as you've got so much stuff going on inside, and knowing my wife and we're having each of our kids of that reflection, taking that ball inside and then going, well, I've got to know what's going on inside my body. And there's actually the thinking of that in a business context that we'll talk a little bit more in due course as well, but it's like listening to your business. And it's those just simple ideas of going, actually stopping and listening and feeling those sensations in the body, because they're all feedback. It's all messages, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And basically, I explain this to my patients. If your brain is a computer and your body is the rest of the robot, the computer can only make the best decisions based on what information it's provided. Ultimately, chiropractic is, I mean, everyone's got different philosophies, but one of the things that we have in here is we really want to get your body and your brain talking to each other really well. And with the more information your brain receives, the better decisions it can make. So then we're not just thinking about injury management, we're trying to catch it and go beforehand. And it's interesting with chiropractic because I say we go get our eyes checked at least twice a year. We don't wait till we're blind in one eye before we get checked. We get our teeth checked frequently as well, twice a year. And we don't wait till we've chipped a tooth to be then the reason why we're getting assessed. So it's still great to have that preventative component because we use our bodies every day and we need to nurture that, because you'll get to a point where we need to make sure that the demands that we're asking of our body is being matched by our abilities. So either we need to adjust what we're asking from ourselves, or we need to adjust the capacity that our body can actually take us through, essentially.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I think you touched on a couple of things. I know my own journey with chiropractic, when I first started seeing chiropractic many, many years ago, it was more that reactionary. It was the, oh yeah, things don't feel right, and it was going there. But it was really what you touched upon there of the connection between brain and body, and the penny dropping, the light bulb moment of it's like, oh yeah, the brain and the nervous system, oh, this is actually getting the nerves around the body for those messages to go around. And that's what then sort of sends that, well, let's get more into a preventative, proactive approach of not just when you get the twinge in the body or whatever.
That's right.
Love that you've shared that. So on that, if you've got a preventative approach for that, if somebody had a takeaway and said, how often do you think somebody, a general average person, I know it's hard, everybody's different and the like, but what would you suggest just to keep yourself in alignment, have the flow of nerves going where and the messages getting where they need to get to?
I think it really depends on what season of life you're in. And there's no cookie cutter approach to healthcare because we're all so different. But I would normally say, as a general rule of thumb, if we can get someone between 4 to 8 weeks, that's pretty good. Cool. And it obviously depends on what they're doing, right? And it also takes into consideration not only what your ergonomic demands are in that moment, but it also is reflective on things like how much stuff are you doing in between those appointments? So if you've got those appointments, but then you're not adjusting your ergonomics, you're not stretching, you're not walking or moving in the water, or you're not doing anything for yourself, that typically means that it's going to be harder to keep that maintenance at more of a cost-effective side of things. Whereas if you are kind of going on the fly, and it's almost like petrol, right? Like you're going to ideally put petrol in before the light's not red or before you've clunked out in the middle of a main road. So, but I think if we can typically get somewhere between 4 to 8 weeks, that's pretty good for anyone that, especially living in Sydney with our infrastructure, how long we spend commuting. Our ergonomics is typically not great. A lot of furniture isn't very ergonomic. So I think that's also a factor. But yeah, that would be my general rule of thumb. And then you start there and then you go from there. If 4 weeks felt great, space it out. Like it should be trial and error. And that's also what science is, right? Like testing things, seeing how that pans out, and then modifying accordingly. So that would be my general advice.
If I go there, I know 100%, but a general, but even you touched upon that idea, it's at the end of that, it's experimenting. It's like, cool, let's have a starting point. Let's have an incremental approach. And again, generally with most things, it will be a couple of ones closer together to feel where you're at. If you find the right practitioner, it's going to help you to create the actual plan.
And no one's got a crystal ball, right? Like you could literally trip on your way out and then have like a new thing that comes up. Like no one really ever knows. And I often say if someone says that they can already say how long it's going to take to fix, I always go, yeah, where's that crystal ball? Wouldn't we all love one?
Would love one. Mm-hmm. And so if we want to help people in the business side of things, get maybe not a crystal ball, but things that they can look at and insights that they can learn and then wonder what might happen. You've been, again, in practice, and again, you've got your sort of your two arms of your business there. We love to share the business side of things and the learnings of being in practice. What experiments have you done? I've already touched upon a little few, but we'll dig a bit deeper on some of those.
I think some of the main things was prior to having my own practice, it was almost like there was still certain things that was the norm within the industry. And I think once I then started to have my own practice, I was like, okay, well, it's not so bad if I do things differently. I think with the motherhood component, like that's really added in another layer of how I look at things in my practice. Saying you're child friendly and being child friendly are like two different things. Naturally, there's stuff that comes with that as well. But it was one of the experiments was let's take on the chance and actually try and add a completely different modality. So it's one thing if you're adding in like therapeutic ultrasound or dry needling, because that's kind of already under the umbrella chiropractic at times. So then I added a whole new health modality that still complements it. AquaNatal was fantastic because it was still in my niche, but then potentially patients are either going to funnel from either my practice into the pool or vice versa. So I think that was really great. I initially had the idea of doing that when I was not having my own practice, and then it kind of was approached with like a bit of a wet blanket kind of response when I was like, oh, why don't I do this? But then once it was my own practice, I was like, let's do it. Let's see what happens.
Can I just jump in there?
Yeah, go for
Going
it.
from concept to then actually doing it. How did you approach that process in sort of going, now it's like, I can actually control this and I can do it. How did it actually look? What process did you go through at that time?
So it was actually during COVID where I did a lot of the training, and it was different because traditionally for AquaNatal, a lot of the time it was run by midwives. You still had to be a health practitioner within the pregnancy space, which I am, but I just wasn't a midwife. I was lucky that I had this fantastic relationship with Donna, who is the person that brought AquaNatal to Australia. And she was kind enough to be like, well, you do meet the criteria. Like, so I feel like she took a chance on me as well. And that's also kind of opened up possibilities for other types of health practitioners to potentially do the course themselves. We did the course during COVID. Then we had all the training side of things. And then it just slowly eventuated from there. And ultimately the demand was there. AquaNatal is one of the few forms of exercise, if not the only exercise, that is completely suitable for all trimesters of pregnancy. And people can participate up until their waters break. Whereas traditionally, other things, running, typically you stop at about 26 weeks if you haven't already. Weightlifting, Pilates, all that kind of stuff normally has some sort of restrictions that you need to ease off as you get towards your third trimester. It was fantastic. It was suitable for all levels of fitness. So you didn't actually have to be a competent swimmer to be able to participate because your head's above the water all the time. If you had gestational diabetes, it was perfect for that as well. It was pelvic girdle friendly, whereas other exercises are not great for that. And so it was in itself this really great thing to be able to offer people in the area. So I was lucky that it's also not saturated in terms of the market itself as well.
Yeah, nice. Something new. And I think even what you're touching upon there, what I'm curious around is that idea of how much of that was kind of like the awareness opened up like a flower, so to speak, as you sort of got into it more versus how much of it you sort of gone, yeah, this is what's going to happen as you sort of rolled it out and the awareness. How would you say there was a balance? Well, not balance isn't the right word, but how did that evolve?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I didn't really anticipate it to be how it has panned out. And I myself, I have rheumatoid arthritis. Initially, I was like, this is at least a great opportunity for me to get in the water because I'm in the water with them. I get to be in there. And I get to move my body, but it's also under the hat of work. So this is like a win-win for me to be able to kind of get a bit of a balance as well. Yeah. And I had less guilt leaving my husband with the two kids because like, oh, I'm working. It's different to be like, oh, I'm going to a day spa. I was originally just happy to get in the water, move my body. And I mean, I had my second pregnancy while I was an instructor. So I actually got to have it twice a week for every week of my pregnancy, which was fantastic. And definitely I could tell the difference between the first and second because that really was a secret weapon for me. But yeah, I didn't anticipate it to be as busy because initially it was like, oh, let's just do it one class a week. And then over time that started getting busier and I was like, okay, let's now add in a different day. And it was different in the sense that normally when I'm with patients, of course, it's like a one-on-one thing. Your time is shared so differently in a group class like fitness setting compared to a treatment modality. It definitely added variety. And I think I do like a little bit of variety and novelty in what I do. I don't think I could do like a rinse and repeat day every day. And then you naturally just get to meet different waves of people, right? Like people aren't pregnant forever, but then at the same time, people still keep having children. So you kind of get into this nice ebb and flow of movement.
And so again, the evolution of what I'm hearing there, it's actually brought about a number of benefits that weren't, you had the idea, you had the concept, you rolled it out, but it has continued to be an evolving piece, but also the benefits that have come off the back of that. Like you say, you've talked about there of the variety and novelty, but even from the business sense of leveraging your time at the end of the day.
Yes.
But also that component. So the two big ones from the business side of things that I'm picking up is kind of that, the one-to-many, which many practitioners struggle with. How do I actually just leverage my time a bit better, especially from managing life, managing a family?
Yeah, and it definitely changed the cash flow perspective as well, because people would be paying in advance, whereas normally people are paying for a service as they receive it. So it definitely changed the cash flow perspective, because sometimes people would be buying multiple passes in advance. So there was that component as well, which was great. Cool. But I also think it also positioned me a bit higher in terms of niching down and having that expertise, because it's, you know, yes, a lot of people, pediatrics and pregnancy care is quite niche in itself, but then to have that as well just definitely added an extra layer of expertise in there, which I'm so grateful for.
Yeah. Cool. And then the flow-on effect from that as well is something you touched upon a little bit earlier of the lifetime support that you're giving your client. And it is that notion of having potentially clients before they become mothers, then how you can follow them through the whole cycle of life at the end of the day by being able to continue to support them across that journey, which again, has that been a bigger thing or a bigger realization before? Or is it sort of like, oh, actually, I thought there would be a bit of that, but it's like, wow, this is really played out to another level.
Yeah, I definitely did not anticipate how it would be now. And I think even just the trust building is there. People are more comfortable to be like, oh, hey, would you be able to check my baby? Is this something that we would be looking at? Or else I think we would have kind of lost that opportunity, because a lot of the time people don't really know that you could hypothetically take a chiropractor to a baby, or people are very scared about it, but because they trust you. And also throughout the class, we encourage women to comfortably speak, and that's how we measure that the intensity is right. So if you were short of breath and you feel like you can't actually carry a conversation, the intensity is too high for that person. That was one of the perks, because you've got this 50-minute, hour-long class where not only are we chatting, but then the women are chatting to each other. They're creating a community. They're creating friends. There's this multi-level connection that they have with me and also their peers, essentially. And they get to meet people prior to having babies, because a lot of the time when you look at mothers groups, it's typically after the fact. And most of the time it's you birthed roughly around the same time in the same location. And that's what you have in common. Whereas they've got time to meet people beforehand and have that as well, which was fantastic. But yeah, I definitely did not anticipate it to be as wholesome as it is. That's for sure.
And that's all I can think of, having gone through the birth process with my wife at the time. And I remember my chiropractic, I got the book, I think it's Well-Adjusted Babies. And it's like, hey, I love this idea of doing this job, but we didn't quite make their different philosophies around the babies. But it's like, I can see that benefit of that. The lifetime cycle and the benefits that flow through to your business from that of, in essence, become a bit of the community hub, which again just has, I'm guessing you get a lot of referral, word of mouth, the community aspect to your business as a result. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I always think that's the most important thing, right? Because ultimately you could throw money at hypothetically Google ads and potentially you'd be getting leads back. But I think word of mouth is always so important, because it means that someone has trusted you enough with not only themselves, but enough to actually vouch on your ability to help someone that they know and love. So I always think that that's really important. And then what has been, it feels new age, but it's not really now, but for a long time, it would be a bit surreal that people would be like, oh, I follow you on Instagram and that's how I found you. And I'm like, oh gosh, like 10 years ago, that was like not a thing. Like 10 years ago, Instagram was just a picture format thing. There was no way to truly get that same kind of rapport building. And I think that it's so great, because the typical consumer now, we're doing our research before we engage with people. We want to know where we're going. Are they legit? Do I trust them? And I think at least when I have had people that have come in through there, we've got a higher chance of hitting it off, because they've already can tell if I'm their cup of tea for the most part, depending on how much you share on Instagram. But I'm pretty much an open book on there. So I feel like that has also helped
Yeah, so what I was just thinking there was another experiment coming into the social side of things and how you've actually gone about the socials and marketing well, I say marketing, but sharing information and knowledge on socials. What experiments have you sort of done in that space? And you touched upon being an open book. So what's your approach there?
I think one of the main things was I can't think of anything more boring than people that show like posture before and after photos. I was like, okay, that's not for me. Let's do more educational. And I think the thing was, even though I see people from all different ages and genders in my practice, I kind of feel like I don't need to tell you if you have a sore neck or back, a chiropractor could potentially help you with that. However, not many people know about pregnancy care. Not many people know about pediatric care. So I niche down in that to the point where sometimes people go, I don't know if I'm in the right place because I have these things. I'm like, yeah, well, we see that, but sometimes it's easier to niche down on social media. But that's basically where it kind of started. It was more educational stuff. And I feel like it definitely took a bit, and I still am not great at like the concept of selling myself to people. I feel more comfortable in the education space. I've always enjoyed teaching. I've always enjoyed explaining things or highlighting things that people weren't aware of. But yes, I think over time, just making people more aware of like what they can do or how they can either help themselves or what I can help them with, essentially. So being a little bit more open with that. And I think when we were at uni, it was very, like professionalism was almost defined as being quite detached. And I think in the world that we live in now, it's such a personal thing and people are going to be trusting you to actually touch their bodies. So, I mean, I wouldn't want just someone that's, somewhat robotic. How would I trust them, right? So I feel like allowing myself to be a little bit more honest. I think even with tomorrow and Wednesday, for example, I've had to move patients around because my son probably won't be fit enough to go to childcare. And I think for a long time, prior to having my own practice, we almost had to pretend that we didn't have a personal life. But I think, to be honest, and I mean, it's probably also because I see a lot of mums and bubs in practice, they get it. Because if it's not me asking to move the appointment around, it's probably been them previously as well. So there is more of a give and take. We've got that rapport. And like I said, I've been able to create a business that provides that flexibility to make it work. And I understand that's a very privileged thing to be able to lean on the village a little bit to do those things. But at the same time, if I didn't lean on the village, it would be also very silly because I think in a work environment, if you didn't delegate things to other people and you carried all those tasks, it would be seen as a weakness professionally. So I like to remind myself that apart from it being motherhood related, if this was in any other setting, it would be weird for me to not ask for help if I had access to help and resources. So that's also something that I've had to accept over time to be able to make it work essentially as well. But yeah, I think just being more candid.
So many cool ideas and concepts there of, at the end of the day, just being yourself, being authentic, educating, and at the end of the day, the right people will come into your space from both that word of mouth through what you share, which again is awesome because you're sharing amazing stuff here and people come into your network, potential opportunities that may end up being clients or collaborations or learnings that can kind of foster. That's been some great shares. So I'd love to sort of round out the chat a little bit with some transformations and client experience. Any particular one or two that sort of stand out in your mind as far as when they first started seeing you, whatever component of what you do and where they've got to a result of what you do for them?
Yeah, I think, and obviously I'll be general because we don't want to be too case specific, but I think some of the main things that come to mind is usually when, I love proving people wrong at times when not mostly like when the patient themselves thinks this is how it's going to be, but usually if someone's telling them how it's going to be and it's not great. A few things that come to mind is typically when we have women that have their babies in a breech position. And that is basically instead of having their head down in their pelvis to be able to come through the birthing canal, they're the other way around. So their head's up and their feet and their pelvis is down as well. So a lot of the times, depending on what stage of pregnancy they're in, sometimes they're told you're not going to be able to have the birth that you envisioned. You're most likely going to have a cesarean. And for a lot of people, that is so disheartening and it takes away some of that patient's power. But I think there's been so many times where we've done the work, we've created space, and look, baby's turned and they've had a fantastic birth and the recovery's been great. And to be able to be a piece of that puzzle combined with all these other modalities that has let them achieve their actual goal and their intention and has set them up with long-term confidence that their bodies can do that is always fantastic. That always gives me a fantastic dopamine boost when I'm at work and I get these beautiful birth stories that come in. And I would actually relate it to one of my first major transformations starting out in practice, which I like to remind myself about. We had this 5-week-old baby and he was just crying all the time. It was first time parents. They hadn't really had anything more than a 20-minute block of non-crying. And it was only when he would feed and it would only be for 20 minutes. And you could tell like they were just so sleep deprived, they were defeated. And one thing that really got to me was she was like, maybe this is just his personality. Like maybe he's just not a happy kid. And babies, even though they can't articulate with you what's going on, they still have all these different ways of telling us that they're not feeling 100%. But basically, after our first session, they slept for a nice stint. They woke up for a feed and they resettled. And that just, I don't know, I just think if you ever kind of doubt if you're doing a good job, I think to be able to give that to people and to really change their parenting experience, right? Like, I think if that was just them for a good chunk of time, not only would that impact how they think of their baby ultimately and how they think of themselves as parents, and almost this failure to be able to provide comfort to your kid would be so disheartening, right? Like a lot of people think I'm meant to be a parent and this is not what I envisioned, and to almost doubt not only themselves but their baby's personality so early on in life, and to be able to be like, no, they actually are a happy kid. They want to connect with you. They want to do all these things. There was just something that was stopping them from being there. Like, I think that was just definitely one of those moments where I'm just like, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to provide for people. And I think a lot of the time, yes, they're happy just to actually have their concerns validated, to be listened to, but then to actually have such a night and day contrast of how things were going and how it is now was just really rewarding for me to see.
Yeah, what I've written down here is just truly life-changing at the end of the day. Hearing that and knowing the flow-on effects of that, being a parent yourself and knowing exactly the experience of the challenges of sleep and the like. And that's a great way to round off our chat. Time has absolutely flown here, but that kind of transformation is something that, again, why we want to share stories like those, the impacts that allied health businesses, practices, business owners are having on clients' lives, and the ripple effect that then creates is literally life-changing. Really appreciate you sharing that transformation and sharing your experiments that have helped you do that over and over and over again. And that's what we're all about, is making sure that we can have more great practices out there, having more of these sorts of experience in building sustainable businesses as a result of these experiments and the learnings that we can share around. So really appreciate you sharing your experiences today, Amy. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there, both from potential client side and those that might want to learn more from you and collaborate more and learn more about what you're actually doing there. Where's the best place for people to connect with you?
I feel like the easiest place would be on Instagram. I'm Dr. Amy Norman on there. Sometimes people look at it and go, is that Dramey Norman? But yes, it's Dr. Amy Norman on Instagram. And then otherwise, you can catch me on LinkedIn. You can catch me on TikTok, which I'm trying to be a little bit more present on. But, you know, it's just that juggle and those self-limiting beliefs that I definitely need to work through at times to be more present on there. But they're the main ways. And then, of course, you can find me at my clinic, Dynamic Chiropractic, which is located in Hurstville.
Awesome. Well, we'll share all those links in our show notes as well to make sure people can be across those. And yeah, really appreciate your time. And that's over and out from us from another episode. Hit the like, hit the subscribe to hear more amazing chats like this, and make sure you connect with Amy off the back of this chat. Thank you very much, Amy.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Healthy Business Lab podcast. Make sure you subscribe to keep up to date with all the latest episodes.